challenge, we're going to combine some of the code and some of the sensors that we've used over the last few days. So we have our medium motor on the front, and in yesterday's challenge you needed to take your Ev3, drive over and grab this block, and then return to that line. Some of you spun the robot around and drove it back, but most of you just drove it straight backwards. So here's what we're going to do today. Your challenge is going to have a few more layers, and I'm going to help you with the code here shortly. You're going to drive your Ev3 once again, and you're going to pick up that block. Then, while you have the block, you're going to go until you go within 10 inches of that board right there, which is going to be read through your ultrasonic sensor. Once you are within 10 inches, your Ev3 is going to turn around. It's going to drive all the way back until it touches this board using your touch sensor. So what you need to do, we took these off, most of you, in order to put the medium motor on. I need you to reattach, figure out how you can reattach your ultrasonic sensor and your touch sensor. You're also going to probably note that your touch sensor doesn't extend beyond the front of your little lift here, your grabber with the medium motor. So you might need to take something and attach it to the front of your touch sensor, so that way it sticks out a little further. So again, your task, take your Ev3, grab a block, go within 10 inches of that board, turn around, and touch that board right there. Now I'm going to jump into the code to show you how to do that. So now that you know your challenge for today, we are going to create the code in order to make that happen. And if you follow along with me here, I'm going to give you all of the basic structure of the code that you need. You're going to need to modify it depending on what ports you're using for your motors, what your sensors are plugged into, and so on. And then also you may need to change your number of rotations or how long you're running your driving motors, simply because your tires are bigger or smaller than your neighbors. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to drive forward and we need to grab that block. I would recommend that we actually lift the medium motor first before we actually start driving. So the first thing we're going to do is put a medium motor block there. Let me zoom in a little bit. Now many of you figured out yesterday that your program was locking up, or it wasn't moving on to the next step, it was freezing, if that medium motor wasn't able to complete the number of rotations. So for instance, that medium motor only needs to rotate roughly 0.25 rotations, just a quarter of a rotation to lift that arm. If you had one rotation, it was lifting too far, it was getting stuck on itself, and until it got into position, it wasn't going to move past this block. So now that we have our medium motor lifted, let's do a driving block, and let's drive forward. Okay, and this is on rotations. I don't know. Let's just say it's going to be more than this. Let's just say 10 rotations. Great. We're going to drive forward 10 rotations. We're then going to lower our medium motor. So let's do it this way. Let's do a negative 0.25 to drop that back down. So now we've captured that block. Now here's where it gets a little tricky, because what we need to have it do now is we need to have it drive forward until it comes within 10 inches of the board in front of my desk. So here's how we're going to do that. This is something that we've done before a little bit. We've done loops. So this is a forever loop here, and then we have an if-then statement. We're going to kind of merge the two right now with what we need to do. So we're going to grab this loop here, and we're going to tell it we want it to drive forward until we're within 10 inches of that board in front of my desk. So here's how we do that. Let's drive, and instead of rotations, I want this to drive forever. So let's just go on. So it's not on rotations. Oh, if you do rotations, it's going to continue to do rotation, a rotation, a rotation, a rotation. So it might just kind of be choppy. Okay? Also, if we're in the middle of a rotation, it's going to complete that rotation before it looks for the next step. This will make sense here in just a second. So right now, we have a infinity block here. So this is going to just drive forever. Now remember, we have the block. We want to drive forward until we are within 10 inches. So here's how we do that. Right here, we're telling it to drive infinity. So it's never going to leave this loop. If I click on this infinity here, I'm going to say, I want you to exit when you see ultrasonic sensor. So when the ultrasonic sensor is, we're going to do distance inches. So now we have our ultrasonic sensor. So we're driving. It's going to check this. And then we're driving. And it's going to check this. So this is going to continue to happen. This is how you exit the loop to move on to the next step. So let's click on the number 4 here now. If it is less than 10 inches, so these are our operators. Number 4, which is selected, is correct. That is what we want to use. If it is less than 10 inches, then we exit this loop. So it's going to continue to do this over and over and over again until it's less than 10 inches. And then we move on to the next thing. So now we're going to do similar. So let's just go back and just double check everything. Lift up the front with the medium motor. Drive forward. Drop the medium motor. So we have the block now. We're now going to continue to drive forward. It's an on until we are within 10 inches. Now the reason I chose on here as opposed to a rotation, it's just going to continue to drive continuously. In the moment that it's within 10 inches, it's going to exit this block. If you had this, let's say, 5 rotations, it's going to go 5 rotations. Are you within 10 inches? Nope. Go back. Do 5 rotations. Are you within 10 inches? Nope. Let's say we're at 12 inches. It's going to continue to do 5 rotations until it checks it again. So you might then be really, really close to that wall, when in fact all you need to do is get within 10 inches. So that's why you want to do on as opposed to a number of rotations. We're going to do a similar block here for the last step. But before we do that, we're now facing this board and we need to turn it around. So I'm going to grab this block right here, the driving block, and we're actually going to turn this thing around. So we can do rotations or seconds, but let's do steering, and let's just turn this thing around. Okay, I'm going to go, let's just say, I don't want to give you the answer. Let's say we're at, whoops, sorry about that, 74. Great. So now we're turned around, and we need to face that board in the back that we're going to continue to drive until we touch it with our touch sensor. Same type of block we do here. Let's grab another loop. There's our loop. It's on forever. It's on infinity. That's not what we want, but we'll get there in a second. We are going to grab our, oops, sorry about that. So we're going to continue to drive forward. So right now we're driving forward again. Let's change this to on. Drive forward until now we're going to exit this loop when we hit our touch sensor. Let's check our state here. Yep, when it's pressed, or you can do when it's bumped. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so we're going to continue to drive forward until our touch sensor. Now once again, something, I'm not going to go through the whole code again, but something you need to pay very close attention to. In my drawing of this and kind of sketching out this code, my driving motors are in B and C. My touch sensor is plugged into port number 1. My ultrasonic sensor is plugged into port number 4. So make sure my medium motor is in A. So make sure, don't just copy this code step by step by step without making sure that your ports are accurate. you're going to need to just modify these numbers now in order to complete the challenge. Okay, these I just made up just for the sake of the example. So now your task is to get your Ev3 to drive and pick up that block, come within 10 inches of the board in front of my desk, turn around, and touch the other side. Touch the board on the other side. When you've completed that, screenshot your code. That's your exit ticket for today.